So almost 4 weeks ago, I bought this, the Fujifilm X100VI, a camera I'd thought about buying for so long that obviously has this absolutely insane notoriety to it, and that is responsible for over a decade of absolutely incredible imagery, at least the X100 line as a whole. Now, I think I've maybe fallen culprit to the harsh reality that a camera or any other piece of camera equipment can hold more weight in your mind as you idealize it than it actually does when you finally get it into your hand. And it's easy to buy something expecting it to produce quickly, to be this refined, excellent thing that you've always wanted it to be the second it touches your hands. And in truth, that's just not always the case. And really, this lesson is kind of the background, the theme for everything I'm going to talk about today. So to get started, I want to talk about 3 reasons I think I'm not particularly connected to the camera yet. 3 reasons I just haven't been able to make great images with it. Because that's exactly what's happened. For 4 weeks now, I've traveled all over New Zealand. I've gone on some pretty great little trips, and I've even spent almost a couple weeks in Australia, a place that I'd been so excited to go for so long. And while I did get some images I'm proud of there, none of them came from this camera. So why is that? Well, there's 3 reasons I'll dig into, and at least one of them relates directly to 2 of the most famous lenses ever made. 2 lenses that I believe most, if not all of you, are using, and 2 lenses that show that what I'm talking about today is not restricted in value to just this camera. It can apply to various bits of equipment. Now, finally, I want to explain why I don't think it matters that I'm not particularly connected to this, and why it's actually not a surprise. Why I'm not going to be selling this camera anytime soon just because I don't have a good image with it after 4 weeks. So hold tight, because there's a lesson to be learned in the expectations we have for our equipment and the way we go about ultimately creating results. That is where we'll finish things. So to dig in, to get started, the first point I want to make relates very directly to the most defining quality of this camera, and that is the fixed focal length 23mm f2, which is a 35mm in full frame equivalent. To keep it simple, I'm going to call it a 35mm going forward. Now I'm going to say something that could upset some users of lenses like this, or just some people who think I'm being lazy when I say this, but I think there's nothing particularly interesting about a 35mm f2. I think there isn't enough depth of field to create any kind of a unique look. There isn't any great light gathering ability that allows it to be particularly incredible at night or early in the day. And in 35mm, we're bringing in enough of the scene that it's pretty dang hard to refine down the narrative. That's not to say it can't be done. I don't want to suggest that whatsoever. But what I mean by that is this camera puts you in a position where you really have no shortcuts. There's no cheat codes. You can't rely on the innate style of the lens. You can't rely on any kind of subjective visual effect that the lens creates for you. You simply have to tell stories. You have to find compelling narratives. You have to simplify your scene and compose effectively. There is no shortcut. And for me, I think it's been a wake-up call. Using a lens like this, I walk into some beautiful scenes and I feel a little bit like, man, I just can't make it look interesting. And I think a big part of all of this is that I just haven't pursued a clarity of subject. In fact, for weeks, I haven't felt particularly creative at all. I'm not feeling like I'm pushing myself very well. It's been kind of a rut. And so a lens like this that's not particularly helping me get out of it. In fact, it's exacerbating the inferior elements of how I go about my photography. I think it's been really challenging me. And it's been making it hard to come away with images that I'm proud of, which in a roundabout way is probably a good thing. Everything I've said relates to far more than just this 35mm. In fact, I think it relates very closely to 2 particular lenses that many, if not most of us use. The first is the 24-70. Maybe one of the most ubiquitous lenses you can possibly buy. It's one that countless people have in their bag. And in truth, every time I've used it, I've found it to be one of the most boring lenses you can buy. It doesn't go wide enough to create a wild or interesting perspective, in my opinion, and it doesn't go long enough to create a depth of field or a sense of compression that's particularly interesting. This also applies to something like the 50mm prime lens. I think these lenses, while they start to introduce more depth of field and they start to introduce a bit more bokeh, they don't do much to actually make your images interesting. All this is to say that the challenges I'm facing with this 35mm, this kind of normal look that it creates, well, really, this idea applies to some of the most compelling, widely used lenses of all time that are responsible for many of the greatest images. And that brings me well into the second point, which is really that I have never had to rely on prime lenses. In fact, I've hardly used them. There's a couple that I keep in my bag, but I rarely reach for them. And this is now one of my main cameras, so I'm finding myself reaching for it and wanting to use it and just not entirely knowing how to work with that. For pretty much all of the last 6-7 years, whatever it is that I've been doing photography, I've used zoom lenses pretty happily, to be fair. And it really boils down to this combination of movement, zoom, and creativity. And right now, removing that zoom element and knowing that my creativity is a little bit slumping, having to rely on movement and fixate on composing my scene through that means and through a different kind of headspace that I'm used to, I've been taking up, I think, more mental room trying to just find the photo than actually finding a way to be creative with it. I don't know if that's making any sense, but essentially you get used to a mental process for creating an image, and this has just thrown me out of my process. And I think it's taking me time to develop a new one, to feel comfortable using something like a prime lens. Now, I'd love to know what you guys think of this. Have you ever transitioned from primarily using zooms to using primes? And if so, like, how did it go for you? What was the first feeling you had? Was it excitement? Was it like letdown? Let me know down in the comments below. One very, very, very quick pause to ask two things. First, if you're enjoying this video, take a second to like, comment, and subscribe, because I can't actually put into words how much that affects channels like mine, especially small ones. Every like, every comment pushes this video and videos like it to other people that may be interested in it, and that really means a lot to me. One more thing, as much as I talk about gear like this, that is fun, glamorous, and can create some really beautiful images, the thing you can invest in that will affect your ability to create images the most is education. I think everybody should be investing more into courses, mentorships, all that kind of business. And I actually have a book, an introduction to photographic storytelling, that I sell on my website. I'll include a link down below, as well as a link to my newsletter. Now, you can buy it at the link below, but if you join my newsletter, you'll find that there's a pretty sizable discount in there. Now, back to the video. Now, the third and final point, and this is one that I am so sure that so many of us have experienced, and it's one that's really, really challenging to get out of the habit of falling into. And it's really the paralysis of choice. So for reference, I pretty much always go out with two cameras. The first is my Nikon Z8 with either a 17-28 on it or a 35-150. And then my second camera tends to be my video camera and potentially a photo or two here and there, especially if the Nikon is on a time lapse or something like that. And to this point, that second camera has been the Fujifilm X-T5. So already there's a pretty full bag there. Z8, 1 or 2 lenses, X-T5, 1 or 2 lenses, and now I've introduced a third camera. But if I want to actually give a camera like this a try, if I want to grow as a photographer, learn how to shoot with prime lenses, learn how to actually understand this 35, and ultimately, I hope, expand the bounds of my creativity, I think I need to leave the Nikon Z8 at home here and there. I think really the key is to get out and use just this one camera, because this one camera is powerful. This one camera is more than capable of creating absolutely astoundingly high quality photos and videos. So why can't I just go out with this? Well, there's no answer to that question. I can, and I should. If you guys are in this habit of overpacking your bag, of bringing 3, 4, 5 lenses, a couple cameras, I think you probably already know this, but it's more than likely you're getting in your own way at times. And I highly suggest you take the opportunity to remove 1, 2, 3 lenses and 1 or 2 cameras and just go out, simplify your setup and make the most of that, because that confinement, those bounds will actually enable your creativity and pull you into a more focused orientation. At least that's my hope, right? The idea of a camera like this, simplicity, elegance, and capability built into something small, portable, and capable, is really, really compelling. But those qualities only really exist when you're using it in some level of isolation. If it's one amongst an army of gear, then all of those qualities that make it so special kind of don't really matter as much anymore. It's just a bit of an extra thing to bring with it. Now, at the start of the video, I mentioned that this idea of not connecting with a new piece of gear just doesn't really matter. And I want to explain a little bit more why I'd say that. First, I think that the lessons we learn from using a new piece of gear, like the 3 points I've gone through, those matter, and we should definitely always be self-reflecting and analyzing the kind of stuff we're working with, and how it makes us feel, and how our results are turning out, and yada, yada, yada. But the actual reality that it's not necessarily like the most compelling piece of gear we have or that we love the most right away, it doesn't necessarily matter. And the primary reason I feel that way boils down to a lesson I learned a long time ago. So the best photographers, they only come away with a portfolio image every, few weeks to a month to every few months. Sometimes they might go years. The point is that there shouldn't be an expectation of constant success, right? Why should I expect to get a new piece of gear that I'm unfamiliar with, that's beautiful, that's gonna challenge me, that is capable of so much, but that I just don't know how to use yet? Why should I expect to walk out of the store and within a few days or weeks have something that I can call a portfolio success? There doesn't need to be an expectation that when you buy new gear, it immediately produces what you're expecting or what you're hoping for it to produce someday. And in fact, when you get something that takes you out of your comfort zone that you haven't quite figured out, well, the process of learning it, of trying to figure out how to be creative with it, of figuring out what its limitations are, its strengths, and how you can ultimately bring those into the narratives that you're entering to create compelling perspectives for your viewers to enter that scene through. Well, all of that, it's going to take time. And I think this point applies to absolutely any piece of camera gear you ever buy. You shouldn't necessarily expect to buy it, head out, and have it produced for you. And I know that that's a little heartbreaking. I hope that makes sense. Let me know what you guys think down below. I've done a whole lot of rambling about this today. Honestly, I think I might be sick and I've probably just got a little bit of brain rot going on, so I hope I made sense to you guys. But as always, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate your time and I can't wait to get back with you next week.